What's up? You're watching Poot's Garage. This week we are getting the truck back together after we kind of tore it apart last few videos. So let's take care of this front drive shaft and kind of figure out what we got to do. And yeah, we got a little bit of action too. Since this video was not exactly planned, I gotta clean some stuff up here. I was kind of right in the middle of working on the rear recovery point for this truck, which I'm gonna actually put on hold for a few while I get this other more important stuff taken care of. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're trying to go to bed? There you go. Get in there. There you go, there you go. There you go. Get yourself in. So I'm gonna have to get real creative here. So I need to do two things. I contacted Tom Woods and they got back to me already. And they want some more technical measurements if we can. So first thing I need to do is I need to get the suspension to fully droop and measure my distance from my front drive shaft. Now that's really hard because this truck is so tall and my jacks obviously don't go that high, so I'm probably gonna have to jack it up as much as I can, take the wheels off and let the axle hang, and I think I can get just barely keep the axle off the ground, and that'll give us some sort of a measurement. And then I can also check the length of the shocks to see if it's all the way down or not. So hopefully we can get that. And then the hard one is actually I got to try and get this passenger side to compress. I need to compress that suspension as far as I can, basically till bump stop, which I don't have in yet, but we can measure and hopefully we can get close. And that's gonna be the tricky one because I actually have to flex this thing out. I actually have to drive it up on something. So I'm gonna look around. I might try and see if I can flex this thing out on the trailer and then put a jack under the opposite side in the corner and push it up. And I don't know, we're gonna get creative. If not, then I have to drive out somewhere and try and do that. Now, in order to get the suspension to flex out, I'm gonna need four-wheel drive. There's no way I'm gonna be able to crawl up in two-wheel drive unless I had like really good traction somewhere. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try and get our drive shaft back together, which I'll show you in a minute. It's still usable, hopefully, and then we can at least have four-wheel drive. We just got to make sure we don't drop this side too far that it pulls it apart again, but we should be able to make it work just enough to test it and get some measurements. And this is our drive shaft. It doesn't look bad. I don't think it ever actually hit the ground or anything. It probably just kind of flopped around a little bit in there. But the problem is I was trying to get it back together out there, you know, out on the rocks, and I can't get it to slide back together. I think there's some damage on the ends of the splines where, you know, that last little bit before it popped out, especially since I was under throttle, it might have ripped the ends of a couple of the splines off, and I can't really see inside the slip end yet here, so I'm going to pull that seal off and see if there's any damage in there. But I mean, I was beating this thing in and it just doesn't want to go, so hopefully we didn't twist something. Hopefully it's still semi-usable in its current state, so I'm just going to try and get it back apart here and see what we got. All right, we got this apart. That thing was stuck in there. I hammered it together hard. It just wasn't going, I guess. So yeah, you definitely weren't gonna get that together out there on the field unless I started grinding on things. But this is what we found. So I pulled the seal off here so I can look in here. And if you look straight down, the ends of all these splines look fine. There's a lot of that blue stuff. It's kind of that blue coating they put on here. But for the most part, it looks decent. I don't see any twist, and the ends of these splines actually aren't too damaged. Might be a little bit of chipping on just the very corners. So I might go through and just barely touch those up with a file, clean them up. This end here, I believe, is the one that's given us the trouble. So right there, you can see there's a little bit of waviness in the spline. I can't tell how much of that is the blue coating versus how much is metal. So we're gonna have to go through, I'm actually gonna clean all that up and see if I can get these pieces to go back together again. Kind of temporarily, just so I can at least try to climb it up on something. Just try not to let the passenger side droop out like that again. And let's get a little closer here. You can see my splines got ripped out that last little bit. So that's pretty impressive to say that this shaft held on till about the last 1/4 inch and then it finally let go. So I got nothing bad to say about Tom Woods on this thing. This was all kind of my fault. I didn't exactly order the correct shaft. This is more like a stock replacement shaft for more standard lift kits and stuff like that, where I built something that's a little more flexible, got a lot softer springs and a little more wheel travel. Like I said, I got nothing wrong with Tom Woods. It was pretty much my fault. I should have called him and told him what I was building and got something a little more custom. So I got nothing against them, and I am glad to see that this thing held together at that last little bit. So that says quite a bit, because we were on the throttle and we were spinning the tire and it was going. Alright, we got this thing kind of cleaned up. A little bit of grinding, a little bit of wire wheeling, and let's see if this thing will at least slide together right now. It's a little moment of truth. We got lots of slop in the beginning now. That'll work. I can go all the way. Blew the grease out even. Now I can't get it back and forth. That'll work. Should be back in action here. We got everything all put back together. Now the only thing I need to do is make sure it's clocked correctly, because you can't have the U-joints out of sync and all that weird stuff. So I had to go look at some old pictures, and there's a grease fitting under the end here, and then it lines up with the grease fittings on the other U-joints, which actually has a loose grease fitting. Interesting. And so yeah, just gotta make sure those line up when it goes together here, and it will be ready to go. So I'm just going to use the flat workbench, kind of line up the two flaps of the drive shaft, and just like that, she goes. All right. We are back in business. I did reinstall the seal and I put grease on all the splines and stuff, so everything's good to go. Hey, this is a good point in the video to go to the map. So let's head over there. What we do is you comment where you're watching from and I'll put a red pin on the map. Let's go. First up this week is Milton, Florida. Then Las Cruces, New Mexico. The whole state of Florida. Oakdale, Tennessee. Evart, Michigan. San Juan, Texas. Eastvale, California. Gypsum, Colorado. Arlington, Texas. Vernal, Utah. Whittier, California. Warland, Wyoming. Slayersville, Kentucky. Justin, Texas. Knoxville, Tennessee. Jacksonville, Alabama. Lake Stevens, Washington. Fort Scott, Kansas. Reno, Nevada. Yuma, Arizona. Farmland, Indiana, Omaha, Nebraska, and last this week is Gold Canyon, Arizona. So keep calling out them cities, them states, them countries, whatever you want to represent. Let's get back to the truck. All right, that's a relief that it goes back together. Now let's get to the truck and see if we can get this front axle to hang as low as we can get it. it's nice to have this thing apart again just to look at it. You can actually see how things are looking. Still looks like the day I put it together. All right, so we got the wheels pulled apart. I actually went through and I measured the current shock height where it's riding at, because I'm curious about if the springs have settled at all. And they're still riding about 24.5 inches long, static height. All the weight's on the axle. So the springs really haven't settled at all, which I guess is good, whatever. So that gives me 5 inches of compression left, 5 inches of up travel, and then I got like 6.5 of down. So we gotta let this axle hang about, hopefully, we'll see if it actually hangs all the way down on its own or not. Kind of curious. And we are hanging. See, the spring's got a little bit of arch to them. The shackles are doing their thing. So next I'm gonna measure these shocks to see if they're actually maxed out right now. So the fully extended length on these is 29.5 inches. So let's see what we got right now. So we're sitting about 28.5. So we got 1 more inch to go. It's not bad though, it's almost down there. It's actually good. The springs are kind of maxing out before the shocks do. Now, if you were flexing, if you put a little bit of weight on one side, it's supposed to be able to push this side down. So we might try that here in a little bit just to see if it actually does anything. So with the axle hanging, now we got to measure this drive shaft length. I've been through this before already, but I did check on Tom Wood's drive shaft page just to make sure that I'm correct here. And we'll go center to center-ish is 30 and 3/4. Now just for funsies, I'm gonna extend this out to 30 and 3/4 and see what it's like. So 30 and 3/4 is right there, and we are like right at our splines. Pretty much, I'm gonna mark it with my finger. Yeah, that slides right off. So where does it grab? So we got about 1 inch of spline left with the axle hanging. So with the axle just free hanging on its own, it only has an inch of spline left, and it is so much easier. I still got an inch of shock left, so them shocks drop down, you know, you just get a little bump and that thing hangs down a little more. That's where I lost it. It went right to the end, it went bing, popped off. Now with the axle hanging, that's not the ultimate. It might go further, especially under rough conditions. When you're flexing, you're pushing one side up, which actually tends to push the other side down further. So there's a lot going on there. And yeah, something just wasn't happy. So we definitely found the edge. Oh, and not to mention, these soft springs, they do have a lot of axle wrap. You can feel it and you can see it in the spring itself. So having that pinion probably twisting a little bit, that kind of adds length to it as well. So we definitely need something a little longer. And I want to try this real quick. So I got the jack under the driver's side, and as I jack it up, you'll actually notice the passenger side dropped more. So we'll actually do this a little bit without disrupting the truck on the jack stands and kind of see what it wants to do. I'm gonna go measure that. Now we have, that's about it. That's pretty much 29.5. So now we've actually maxed out this shock here. I'm gonna crawl under there and measure that drive shaft one more time. In doing so, we actually measured it out now, and it's actually shorter, so it's actually at 31 inches now. So, I mean, you gotta think about your pivot point is on the outside of the spring here. You push that side up, this is your pivot point, so the axle end is going down. So being the diff in the middle, the diff is gonna come up regardless, but I just wanted to double check that. It's getting hot in here. It's back on the ground. I went and had some hot dogs for lunch. Let's get underneath this thing and get this drive shaft back in. I'm gonna nickname this drive shaft Too Short. First, I gotta find my bolts. They are lost in my tool bag somewhere. Uh-oh, government's after us. They're doing the chemtrails. Toolbox actually works really good. We don't need that in there. I'm gonna have to source a new U-bolt too. This one here, the threads are getting all munched up on, so we'll have to find a new set of those too. Oh, duct tape. Alright, next is to measure this thing again. I'm going to measure it at static height. This one's a little bit funky. So it's static, right around the middle there. We're sitting about 28, maybe. 28 and a quarter, we'll say. Alright, we got the front drive shaft back in. Next is we gotta go find a spot, try and push that passenger side up as hard as we can and see what happens. I'm a little worried because I was putting that back in. I mentioned earlier one of the U-bolts was kind of stripped out. I felt the threads released completely, so it's not in there very tight. So hopefully it'll survive the last test that we need to do. But these are the measurements we've gotten so far. Extended, we are 30 and 3/4. Static, which is just sitting the way it is, 28 and a quarter. So dropping down, we've already gone 2.5 inches just in drop. And I assume going up is gonna be pretty similar, maybe a little less. But I'm pretty sure on Tom Wood's website, they set these things up to have 2.5 inches of compression and like 2 or 2.5 inches of extension. So if this is right so far, we're right in the middle, and it's just not enough, which means we need to have an extra long splined shaft. It's getting hard to flex this thing out. It just it wants to keep going. See how our rear is tucking. Let's pull these rocks out here and watch it move. Whew. So we are pretty much floating. It is just a little bit more to go. Let's see how we need to trim more in the front here. But that's not why I'm here. Yeah, we made it back again. I gotta double check these measurements. I already screwed up. Somebody even reminded me, make sure you take a tape measure when you go out and do it. And what did I do? I forgot to take a tape measure. So I was kind of using some string and different things to make measurements. So I gotta measure those out real quick and see what my measurements were. And through the mess on the bench, I did my measurements, and a surprising little thing is that when I compress that passenger side like we just did in that video, my drive shaft only shortens up about 1/2 inch in that. Because, well, you're pushing the driver or passenger side up, but the driver's side's pulling way down, and having the diff in the middle, it's kind of, you know, it's counteracting itself. It's kind of in the middle, so it's not really doing a whole lot. So, that's not a very accurate measurement, to be honest. What would be more accurate is if you can actually compress the entire axle flat up as hard as it'll go. Like, I could go hit it on a big bump and try and bottom it out, but I got other things interfering and I don't have bump stops, so I'm not trying to do that. But yeah, so I don't think we're really gonna get a compression measurement for them. I still don't think it's gonna be as extreme as the droop, but yep, I'm gonna contact them, Tom Woods, and see what they say about all that.